Okay, so the Pollock's Works of Cedarville. We have covered this site pretty extensively here on the channel. Today, we're going to be covering it once again. We're not going to really be focusing too much on the Pollock Works in itself. I have a few videos of that you can check out on just the Pollock Works. We're actually going to be emphasizing something pretty interesting in this video. We're going to be emphasizing the stone structures that are scattered throughout this complex. Now here's a little bit of history about the Pollock Works before we do delve into it, because it does add context to the situation. So the Pollock Works is a defensive structure that is built by the Hopewell culture. The Hopewell culture we've also delved a lot into in this channel, so make sure to check those videos out. The question of why they built defensive structures is of fascination in itself, and it's something that I'm going to be covering in later videos. We're sticking with the stone structures. The Hopewell culture were known to build stone structures, things like stone mounds, stone effigies, particularly of snakes or serpents, like the serpent mound, and among other effigies of like bear, raccoon, etc. There have been many different stone structures that have been found that were built by the Hopewell culture, and today it's no different. Here's a few pictures of some of the different structures that we're going to be delving into in this video. We're going to be mapping them out so you can visit them yourself if you ever decide to visit the Pollock Works.
I highly recommend doing this, by the way.
And we're also going to be highlighting some potential debunking of some of this, I guess. Debunking, we'll put that in quotations. We're essentially going to theorize some different ideas about these structures and what they were used for. And we're also going to use a little bit of evidence to correlate that information. So let's delve into it. All right, so the first structure that we're going to take a look at here is the magnificent stone wall. Now there's two notes that I want you to take about this stone wall. One is take a note of the higher ground. This wall is built upon a ridge line, and you'll see it in the video coming up. But this wall is built upon a ridge line of higher ground, almost as if it was meant as some sort of defensive means or a landmarker, if you will, a very big landmarker at that. This thing stands at a whopping over 1,000 feet, I believe. It probably was longer than that in its heyday. But you take a look on the map here as well. Another thing to take note here is how close this wall is to the mound. It's almost as if they were protecting this sacred part of the village. So those are two things I want you guys to take note of with this map. One, the mound, and two, the fact that it's built along higher ground. So let's take a look at some of the video here. All right, so this first bit here, if you noticed on the map, I'll pop it up again here. You'll notice that I drew three little dots at the beginning. The three little dots is what we're seeing here now. It's little splits of the wall that have eroded away over time, so it's not as prevalent. And then where the line is thicker on the map, that's what you'll see later in the video and the pictures that you saw before, where the wall is much more prevalent. I believe that this thing stood in its heyday upwards of 7 to 8 feet high, just judging by how much stone was there eroding away at the hillside. And it's probably even more so than that, I would say. That's just a rough guesstimate. It could be less, but one thing I do want to note about this, now here's a great picture of the wall. This is where the line starts to thicken a little bit on the map, like I was saying before. This is as you're going up towards the mound where the wall begins to fortify more. So right here you can kind of see it's almost as if the wall is built into, well, it's definitely built into the hillside, right? But it's almost as if the wall is buried. It seems as if the wall could potentially be bigger than what we're seeing because it's buried beneath lots and lots of dirt. That is my assumption. Whether or not that's true or not 100% sure. There has been a lot of farming and settlement in the area over the years, especially around the 1800s. There was a lot of settlement activity, which is important to note about this wall. So it was very known, this is part of the debunking theory of this. It's very well known that the settlers, early farming settlers, would use stone fences as ways to mark their territory. And there is a farm right behind this wall and right behind the mound as well. Now, do I believe that this structure is still built by Native Americans? Yes, I do. Mainly because of its location and the significance of the location, right? This wall, and the fact that it's built by the Hopewell culture, which we talked about before, were known to build stone structures. So there's three pieces of evidence why I think that it's built by natives. But I do think potentially that a farming settler, or farming settlers rather, built upon this already existing wall to create a quote-unquote stone fence for them at the time. I do believe that it's built upon by later settlers. And right here, I'm looking at one of the rocks. I wish I would have delved more into the geology more. That's something I want to delve more into in a later video. But I did notice that some of the rocks were very different from one another. It's almost as if the wall was built at a different time. Different rocks were being used. And you saw it there. I uncovered a little bit of a rock, but I do thoroughly believe that this thing was built upon by settlers. It was an already existing structure, probably a wall of some kind, and it was later used as a fence or a land marker, if you will, for settlers. This area had tons and tons of settlement activity. So here you get a great view of where it is on top of the ridge. Here we are at the very end of the wall. This is right before you approach the mound. I believe we'll see the mound sign here shortly. So this thing was really big, you guys. This video doesn't do it justice. I recommend, there's the mound sign. I recommend going and checking out the full video where I walk this entire thing. And I'll definitely be covering more videos on it in person on the channel. So make sure to subscribe. But yeah, this is the very, very end of the wall here. Now, here we are at the end of the trail, and right up here is the mound. Now, I want you to take a quick note while we're up here on the mound. If you see this line that I've drawn here, this gives you an idea of where the wall is in proportion to the mound, or in comparison to the mound, location-wise. So that's a good idea. Now, take another look at this picture. Right here, where this line is where this structure is right here. Now, this is just a quick little note. This is right below the wall. I think that this is potentially a section of the wall that eroded away, or it's part of an old pathway. I'm not 100% sure, but there is a small structure here right at the pathway. So let's now discuss the stone mounds. So it's very well known at this site that there were 3 entrances, possibly 4, a fourth that we uncovered in this video, of which there were stone mounds built. Now, this is, like I said, very well known. I'll leave some citations below, but I want to highlight real quick on the map where these stone structures are, along with some pictures. So real quick, here's a few different pictures. This is the picture of the first structure along this path. And then here is a picture of the second structure along this path. And there's only 2 structures really right along this path. There is 3, but one of them's a little bit harder to see. And then here is the map of which these are. This is essentially right along the path of which you take to get to the waterfall. And the waterfall is where you lead outside the Mossy Creek to other confluences, other riverways or creek systems. So it was probably a very, very sacred site because they were essentially entering the rest of the world at that point. So that's why I think that these structures are built here. I believe that they were very important landmarkers, if you will. So let's go uncover some of the video of these structures. They're very interesting. So here we are at the very first structure, and this one is the least prevalent of them all. You notice that it is elevated, it looks artificial, and this is right next to the other structures. So I am fairly certain that this is remnants of an old structure. This very well could be Now, it's well known that prehistoric Native Americans, as well as colonial Native Americans, all the way up into colonial times, they would sometimes use temporary stone structures as temporary burial sites. They would essentially bury their loved ones, or their comrades, if you will. They would place temporary headstones, prehistoric headstones, using rocks like this, and then they would come back, pick up the bones, and inter their loved ones later on at a regular burial mound. This is well known that they would practice this practice, so it's very well that some of these structures could be that. And we'll take a look at some better examples of that at the end of the video with the last two structures. But let's take a look at the second structure here. So the second structure is by far the most amazing, in my opinion. And I believe the second and third structure are essentially the same structure in a way. Like I said before, this is right at the entrance. Look how defined that is, by the way. Wait until you see this little clip coming up. But like I said, this is right at the entrance of leading up to the waterfall. So this probably would have been a very sacred site to the native people who lived here in ancient times, because it would have been a symbol of leaving their home and exploring the outside land, the mysterious, the unknown. Now look at this pit, you guys. This is absolutely nuts. It is way better to see in person. I highly recommend checking these out in person. I'm going to be coming back here when there's not as many leaves for sure. I'm going to bring a leaf blower out here. I'm going to do something to get rid of these leaves. But look at the inside of that. Now, I do believe that this was one of the mounds that they documented at the entrance. Either that or this is an unknown entrance, but it's it's along a very main trail. So my guess is that this mound was documented. And we'll take a look at a little bit of the other entrance mounds as well, stone mounds, but they're not as prevalent. But it's right at the main entrance of the Pollock's work. We'll take a look at those at the very, very end. But here's the third structure here. And the third structure is right next to the second structure. So like I said, I do believe that these are essentially the same structure, or they serve the same purpose. Sorry, I got a lisp going on. I have dip in my mouth. But here you can see a little bit of the more defined pit of the third structure. And there is the second structure. Look how close it is. Look how defined that is over there. And you notice too, at the very end, or not at the very end, right there when I turn the camera, right here, you see the trail right there. That trail is, yes, it's a modern trail, but it would have been the same trail to be used because it walks right along the ridge of the Mossy Creek. There is a aerial view, quote-unquote aerial view atop the hill looking down upon the mounds. It would be great to get some drone footage of these mounds. Perhaps one day we will do so. And here is the top. Here is the forest. This would be what I presume to be the unknown for these people, in a sense. Now let's take a look at the last little structure besides the other entrance mound we'll cover at the end, and a little bit of a stone pathway as well. But these structures here are a little bit off the unbeaten path. Number 4 and 5 you see here on the map. They're a little bit off the beaten path. And it's kind of hard to tell that these are structures. They're very, very small, but I am like 99% sure these are structures. And I believe that they are potentially what I said about the first one. I believe that these are potentially temporary burials of some sort. Whether or not that's the case, I'm not sure, but they're so small that I presume that these were temporary burials for them to essentially mark the grave so they could come back and inter the dead later. So anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at these structures real quick. They're not very prevalent, but they're still cool nonetheless. So this one's the most obvious of the two up here. It's very, very defined. It is completely flat up here. There are little to no rocks, absolutely no rocks actually that I found up here, aside from the rocks that were on this, what appears to be what I would call a pimple mound. A pimple mound being a very, very small artificial mound. Here's some great shots of it. I literally get on my butt to get these shots, but they really do its justice. And like I said, I think they use stones like that. There's another great shot of it. And right here is where the second structure is. Now this one's very, very hard to see. but you can sort of see it when I get on the ground here. You can see I rub my finger around it a little bit. It's kind of like a circular embankment almost. Very odd. This one I'm not 100% sure or 99% sure if it's a structure, but I'm like, 95% sure because it's right next to that one, which that one that we just looked at, I'll take note of the stones that were on top of it. I do believe that those could potentially be temporary headstones, gravestones, if you will. So like I said, I do think these were used for temporary burials. But who knows? Who knows? So I probably shouldn't be walking on them like that if they are structures, but actually definitely shouldn't be. Sorry for that. I won't do that again. Okay, so we're going to cover these last structures kind of quickly, but I do want to take note that this is right at the entrance, and I do believe that the stone path that we're going to talk about here is created by settlers. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but you see here on the map, the 2 X's are where I presume 2 of the mounds once were, and the 2 lines you see there, I believe are they are the pathways, most certainly the pathways, one of which is the very main trail, and the other of which leads up from the creek. So there are 2 pathways here, and the mounds aren't really that prevalent, but you see a lot of the erosion from the mounds. So let's take a look at it. So let's get the elephant out of the room. This is the stone pathway, and at first I thought that this stone pathway was ancient and it was created by natives. But after some closer examination, I do believe that it was created by settlers based on a trail that had already existed from ancient days. So I believe this road, this pathway, was built upon by settlers. Sort of maybe like the stone wall, although the stone wall is a little more argumentative. But I do think this pathway for sure is made by later settlers. So again, I'm going to take the time to recommend you check this site out if you have the opportunity. Highly, highly recommend, because the video doesn't do it justice. But here we are at one of the main entrances, and this is the entrance that leads to the creek. And here we have remnants of the stone mound. Now, these ones are part of the main entrance. They're very well known. This is literally the main entrance to the main trail of the Hopewell. So these mounds have been lost to time over the years, but there is a lot of evidence of them along the hillsides that you just have to get a look for yourself. Here's a little bit right here that you see, and it's just scattered piles of rocks, just like the wall that we saw where they was eroding away from the hillside. Same idea here. It's completely eroding away from the hillside. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, that like button, all that cool YouTube stuff that we got going on. And make sure to check me out on X as well. I now have an X page that you can join and check out. I've been having a lot of fun over there. It's a pretty cool website. And you can also check out my membership page here on YouTube if you would like to support. If not, it's okay. You can also support for free by subscribing. But this is going to be it for me for this video, guys. I love you very much. Thank you so much for the support. Peace!